An age-old question. The political left or the political right? Which one is better? In this episode, we will find out. So, let's get started. First of all, welcome back for another podcast episode of Aceto Magazine. In this episode, I'm going to talk about a topic that I actually talked about it quite a bit, or it has been recurring all the time, and it is about the division, the binary divide between left and right in political terms. So, leftist thinking, rightist thinking, or conservative. Actually, the other day there was already an episode about the political cube. There was an extensive discussion on why those two sides of the spectrum are not enough. I expanded the political spectrum and the axes by adding another dimension. So this is a very interesting novelty in political science. Basically, it's an innovation that I introduced. So I highly recommend you to watch this episode. It's going to be linked down below, and also there is an article about the political cube. So I highly recommend you to dig deeper into this topic if you're interested. In this episode, I'm going to talk about the structural strength and weaknesses of leftist thinking and rightist thinking. Obviously, there's no such thing as one is better than the other. Both are not so good, if I want to remain polite on this one. So I reject both. So there's no bias towards any side, but I just want to neutrally assess what are the pros and cons of each side, and why do we think like that. There's also some sociological aspects tied to our thinking in those terms. So, beginning with the political left, the major point that needs to be made up front is that when we talk about those concepts, each and every one of you have specific ideas about what we are talking. And this already, if we look at it from a scientific perspective, is already a bad thing. Because when I say political left or the leftist, you immediately have some sort of idea what I'm going to talk about. I mean, most prominently, you think about the color red. Isn't that true? I mean, be honest. If you hear the word political left, the first thing that comes to your mind, or one of the first things, is the color red. On the other side, if we say political right, or if I say conservatism, it's the color blue. There is an association between those with those colors when we talk about those concepts, and I'm not only talking about it in the context of the United States of America. It is also in the context of each and every party that we have on this spectrum in all other countries as well. So most parties on the left, because they have some sort of red included in their logos, stemming from basically the communist and Marxist culture. The connotation is already there, and blue is the opposite color there, but also kind of giving the image of the calm, banking and rational character that conservatism has, carries the color blue. But this is very superficial. There are also other concepts tied to it. When we think about the left, we think about buzzwords such as fairness, democracy, equality, and minority rights, for example. And when we talk about the right, we think about, or conservatism, we talk about tradition, we talk about economics, or we think about those terms. We think about values, family, and so on and so forth. So there are also other concepts tied to this word. it is very dangerous to think in that way, and I would recommend you to also kind of look at yourself and how biased you are when dealing with those words, and try to dismantle them. Try to look, where does the concept of leftist thinking comes from, and rightist thinking. Try to dismantle that and untie it from those concepts that we usually kind of immediately think of when we are hearing about those words. So a conservative state system can also be democratic. There's no problem in structuring it around that. So I don't see a reason why we should tie the idea of democracies to the left and not to the right, as well as family and religion. I mean, just because leftist thinking is redistributive, it does not mean that family and tradition cannot be kind of integrated into this thinking. So try to dismantle that, and that is the first step that we need to do when we talk about those concepts. So these are common weaknesses that those two concepts have, or those two camps of thinking have. But starting off with the political left, let's start with the left. We can talk about the advantages first in order to kind of see where this thinking comes from. And as I just touched upon this point earlier, the leftist thinking is born out of the Marxist thought that there is a universal power struggle of poorer people against richer people. The division that Karl Marx made back in the day was that there are, in a capitalist system, the means of reproduction basically give you power within society and help you elevate yourself and kind of live a worthy life. Means of reproduction mean, for example, you own a factory. Your basic job is, if you just look at it on a superficial level, is to manage the factory, right? But with having access to all those machines and to this workforce and make them work for you, you are not only extracting monetary value for yourself, but also have the value, or kind of the strength to expand and multiply your value and worth by investing and extracting more return on your investment than you would do as a worker who does not have those abilities to invest. So, for example, you have a factory with 100 machines and 1,000 workers. You, as a factory owner, can go to the machine factory that produces the machines that you need, and buy the next machine, implement or integrate it into your factory, and increase your production capacity, which then does not have a linear effect on your income and growth of value, but a more or less exponential growth. So the invested amount gives you, because you already have means of reproduction, gives you in the next step a higher return on investment. Obviously with limits, there are diminishing returns at some point, and so on and so forth. But if we think about the rudimentary level and the middle level of wealthy people, the middle class, the upper middle class, and the production or the producer class, basically you have a high return on investment. Whereas the worker just gets enough money to make a living and survive with his family, and just provide for the family on a day-to-day basis. So there's no additional value, no additional money or means of reproduction to kind of take the next step and kind of pull yourself out of this misery. And leftist thinking is born out of this idea that from this Marxist perspective, where this discrepancy between means of reproduction is so glaring, that the state needs to intervene in order to redistribute the means of reproduction from the upper class to the lower class in order to kind of level the playing field. So this is the idea, and from that we have obviously over 100 years of development. The idea kind of developed, other aspects and elements were added, and so on and so forth. And then you can easily see how other ideas are tied to it, because the core idea is that the economic equality is secured within such a state. And then, because you already talk about the aspect of equality, you project the idea of having a united and unified society, an equal society, onto other aspects of life once the economic discrepancy is starting to get more leveled out. So then, once this aspect is seeing progress, the leftist idea developed into something that included racial and gender equality, and also ecological equality into the agenda. And these are positive aspects, because the left is kind of attentive to power discrepancies between different classes, between different groups, and tries to aim for a unified society, which is a good thing. And this is definitely an advantage of leftist thinking. So, for example, women's rights were pushed by a leftist agenda because from the economic equality aspect, it moved to the gender equality aspect. And obviously, today we even talk about racial equality in multi-racial societies, such as the United States of America, Canada, and some European countries. So this is definitely a positive takeaway from the left. And obviously, from that point onwards, equality, an idea of the unified society, ideas of democratic participation, and so on and so forth, kind of gained more prominence. So it is, because I said in the beginning that we need to dismantle the bias. There are reasons why we think that way and why we have those connotations on a daily basis, but it does not follow that they're exclusive to one side or the other. On the other side, we turn to the positive aspects of conservatism. And conservatism is basically not a stream that developed in some sort of way, but is rather just kind of a manifestation of the capitalist idea. It means that basically, if we want to be brutally honest, the conservatives were always there. The right, the political right, as we call it, is actually the mainstream and the status quo. So, meaning it is not a political stream in itself, because it just defends that everything as it is right now is supposed to be like that, like in its natural state. So the rightist idea is the lenience and the trust in the natural dynamics of this planet, which in itself is kind of a quite positive thinking. It is, in the context of capitalist economies, defending that we do not need to redistribute wealth from one person to another, and in order to achieve equality, because equality is already there. The system, in the view of the conservatives, is that the market dynamics already give you this equality by having beneficiaries on the production side, and on the worker side, those who cannot contribute enough to the economy in order to get the benefits, right? So the market dynamic already kind of determines who, or kind of gives those advantages to those people who work more or better or smarter, and therefore kind of it is not really an inequality or an imbalance to the political right, but rather the state or the display of who worked the most or the best, kind of. And within that, the political right not established, but kind of because it is conserving and preserving the current order, the idea also had a spillover effect, similar to the left, onto other areas of life, such as family, tradition, culture, and so on and so forth. Because the main idea is that everything as it is perfect in itself, because the natural condition is perfect in itself. Those cultural and sociocultural aspects, such as family, religion, and tradition, are already present. They need to be preserved too. So this is an inherently positive thing, because it acknowledges the importance of our intrinsic infrastructure, our intrinsic cognitive, or the cognitive infrastructure that we have, the feelings that we have, the soul that we have, and those things that were born out of our cultures and mentalities that we bring to the table. It preserves the idea, or this stream of thought preserves those things and believes that they need to be honored and kept, and also carried on to the future and to the next generation. And as long as you follow those virtues and live those traditions and are loyal to those principles, the market dynamics will also turn out to be in your favor. So these are the points that the conservatives, the political right, is defending, positive things, and also quite true. Now let's turn to the negative points, and this is the rather interesting part of this episode, because as I said, I'm rejecting both sides categorically, not because they do not have some truth to them, but thinking in those categories is detrimental to me. Is a topic for another episode. But in this case, starting with the left, the biggest problem and the biggest disadvantage that the left has is that it is a reactionary political stream. The political left is reacting to things that are naturally there and dynamics that naturally occur. So it is dependent on the existence of a certain order, meaning the right, while the right already defends something that is already there. It's a realistic view, it's a display of how things are, but there's no normativity tied to that. But we talk about that later. We're talking about the disadvantages of the left first. So the left is dependent on the existence of the right in order to exist. Because if there were no inequalities in this world, the whole leftist idea would not have emerged. And this is also kind of the reason why it emerged so late, when capitalism and the Industrial Revolution became a thing and solidified itself. And this is a big structural weakness, as you might have noticed during all other episodes, and especially during in the episode on power. It's episode 22. Everything that is dependent on the existence of another thing is not very good. It's weak. It's not very useful. And it is the same thing with the leftist idea. There are innovations, there are points that help the right to develop and kind of go to the next level, but these are all only reactionary. And because they are reactionary, all people who defend leftist ideas, they kind of take the underlying premise of reactionary thinking and apply it to all other policy areas as well. So we can see this also in political discourse. In every country there is. The left, the political left, is always criticizing. The agenda of the left is only built on the premise to criticize the right. Seldom we see that the political left is praising the right for doing certain things. Seldom do we see that they try to improve certain things just to a certain point, but they rather want to, and often we see that rather they want to overthrow things, want to do things differently, over and over again. And this is an incredibly exhausting exercise, negotiating and analyzing things with those people, because they, no matter what you say, the premise is being against it. And it is the killer of technocratic thinking. It is the killer of technocratic thinking. And me, as a pure technocrat in political science terms, or also in general thinking, I'm a very strong defender of the technocratic idea. It is extremely difficult to negotiate or think about and analyze and go into political matters, find the right solution, when everything you say is criticized and needs to be overthrown by the left, because the nature of the thought is reactionary in itself. It only reacts to things that are perceived to be not perfect. Nothing is ever going to be perfect, and this is the problem. But perfection in itself is not even a goal by the leftists. It is just the need to criticize and to not even to improve, but always to react to something that seems not to fit with the idea of equality and the ultimate flattening out of differences in people. Extremely big disadvantage, and makes the whole idea of equality having a bitter taste, kind of. And talking about flattening out all the differences in society, the second weakness of leftist thinking is the following. It is built on a very wrong premise. I don't know how to, if something is wrong, it's wrong. You cannot be wronger than wrong. But in this case, you can be, because it is built on the premise that the class discrepancies in countries are always the same. So it equates mankind over the ethnic factor, which is simply not true. What I want to say by this is the following. When Karl Marx talked about the discrepancies between upper class and lower class, so bourgeoisie and workers, he did not differentiate between the cultural differences of other nations. So workers' class, and this is what it says, workers of the whole world, I don't know how the quote exactly goes, but workers unite and something like that, and it talks basically about all working classes. So the working class of Germany, apparently, or to him, is the same as the working class in China, in Zimbabwe, in Argentina, and Turkey, Russia, and so on and so forth. They're all the same. They share the same characteristics, same struggles, and so on and so forth. Wrong. The bourgeoisie in Britain, same as in Nigeria, as in Singapore, and so on and so forth. Wrong. These are fundamentally different people, different cultures, different behavioral patterns, different ideologies, different religions. They act and think and feel in different ways. How can you equate them just because they have the same amount of money, or the same amount of, or the same percentage less money than the bourgeoisie in the respective country? This is simply not right. And because it's not right, all the ideas that developed in the left afterwards are also built on on shaky grounds. So it is not very sustainable what Karl Marx said there. And now let's turn to the disadvantages of the political right. And here, obviously, the biggest disadvantage or the biggest shortcoming of the political right is that it is not proactive. There is a reason why we call it conservatism, because it tries to conserve and preserve an existing order, as we said before. And therefore, just as the political left is always trying to criticize something, the political right developed into kind of a state of mind where everything that comes from outside is rejected, including innovations, including improvements, including things that help us to progress. The political right is hindering that in most cases. And this is a big shortcoming, because as human beings, we want to progress, we want to kind of develop and kind of reach new heights of human development. We want to find new technologies, we want to improve those technologies, and so on and so forth. There are lots of things that we need to do, and it's good that we are doing it. So the impulses that we need from that perspective are missing. And now we are just thinking about innovations in terms of technology and stuff, but this is not true. Social innovations, political innovations, discursive, sociological innovations, and so on and so forth. Now, if we talk about the things that happened with Galileo Galilei, who said, well, the earth is round, and so on and so forth. Today, from today's perspective, we are often saying this will never happen again. But this is definitely not true. We are still in this thinking that when something comes from outside, and even the leftists do sometimes, something new, something unknown, we tend to reject it. And this is a natural instinct that we have. But we need to overcome it, and the political right is not doing it quite well. So this is why we always feel in the political discourses that they are trying to be, or they are a bit more backwards and not that progressive. This is because they are halting progress. Obviously, not everything that comes as an innovation is progress. That's true too. But in the end, the premise of conservatism is to preserve the current order. And therefore, this is a major structural shortcoming. And this leads to the second disadvantage, which is something, a result or kind of the extension of not being able to defend, and this is radicalization. So if the political left is too threatening, the only way that political conservatives can go is deeper into what is already there, meaning their culture, tradition, and religion, for example. Therefore, we have streams such as Christist movements and whiteist movements across the United States of America. The Christists and the whiteists are extremely radical groups that have like this racial hate towards other races. May they be black, Latino, Arab, or whatever. So this is not a natural response, but this is, or this is not natural behavior, but rather a response to the increasing threat from the left that always tries to challenge everything. And if you have a weak character and need those values, those virtues, then the only way to go for you as a conservative or as someone who identifies with this stream of thought is to go into depth of what is already there. And this is your culture, this is your language, this is your religion. And therefore, the radicalization factor is, in this case, a bit higher than it is for the left. Obviously, radicalization there is also possible, but it's more dispersed. So leftists radicalize in the sense of equality for everything, and then they are throwing a bunch of concepts into the arena, and everything needs to be equal. Everything needs to be equal, but not one specific thing in depth. Whereas rightists, they focus on one thing. For example, if you are a religious person and you feel challenged by all those incoming inputs from the left, the ever criticizing left, you are becoming a more radical follower of your religion. Or if you are more lenient towards racial discourse and topics that relate to that, you are more likely to be racist and against foreigners, for example. Major shortcoming of the right, and definitely something that makes this whole concept and whole thinking detrimental to technocratic thinking as well. So we have the technocratic thinking killer on the left and also on the right, because they are both too emotional. The one is always criticizing, so we cannot find a proper solution, and the other one is radicalizing, is just going for one way, doesn't see anything else, is stagnating, and is hindering progress and process. And being located nowhere, I'm not even saying I'm located in the middle, because I'm not, I'm a technocrat. I'm getting the crossfire of being criticized for all those things that are not equality pushing, and on the other side it is kind of against those classical values and the radical interpretation of things, and it's too technocratic, it's too technical, no emotional virtues and values attached. Both untrue, definitely. So, where do we need to go? Once again, my book, DEVLET, is the only answer to it. Technocratic policymaking, technocratic thinking, no left, no right, just doing the right thing, so to say, technocratic as technocratic as it gets. Highly recommended, as always, down in the description box. So that's about it. So we explored the advantages and disadvantages of the political left, political right, and in the end, they are both useless, and I can easily say that thinking in those categories is useless. If you tend to identify with one of those sides, please reconsider. It is something that will not. It's just not sustainable to think that way. And I mean, come on, you cannot reduce yourself to just one word and just try to push every concept into it, saying this and this and that. And it's just not going to work. It's, in my opinion, you're disrespecting yourself when you are positioning yourself on just one side and view the world in terms of right and left, and there's just the one side or the other. That being said, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I definitely enjoyed it, and I hope to have you back for another podcast episode of Aceto Magazine. My name is Emre Şentürk. Thank you very much for listening. Have a good one, and bye.